Aloha! You're listening to Body Worship, an oasis for the mind, a temple for the body, a sanctuary for the soul. I'm Anna Marie, and welcome to my podcast, where we explore the most cutting-edge alternative modalities, ancient rituals, and sacred practices that shaman, yogis, and healers from all corners of the world have practiced to deeply connect with Source. We'll discuss ways to advocate extreme self-care and align your emotional, mental, and spiritual mind, body, and soul. Thanks for tuning in to Body Worship. Aloha. This evening is going to be a little bit different. I am dedicating this podcast to all of the beautiful people on the Puna side of Hawaii. When I travel, I love immersing myself in a culture. I don't like staying at resorts or hotels unless it's there on business. But once I have my time to myself, once the business is over with, I usually rent a home or a yurt or a hut in the jungle or something that really allows me to penetrate the crevices of the culture and the area that I'm in. And the big island of Hawaii was no different for me. When I was looking for a home to move to, I had entertained moving to Hawaii, and I will one day live there, I know that. And Puna was one of the areas that I had anticipated moving to. I was pregnant with twins, which I ended up losing, and I was going to give birth at Kahuna Beach there because there was a woman who was a midwife who helped women deliver with the dolphins in the cove. The dolphins come up when you're in labor and you have a painless childbirth. So that's what attracted me to that side of the island. When I ended up going just on a quest to see where I wanted to live, I really wanted to learn under a Hawaiian Kahuna or a shaman. And that's when I came upon Stewart Blackburn. He is known on that side of the island as Santa, and he was teaching a healing circle at Kalani Retreat, which was this incredible retreat that so many people went to. It was a yoga retreat, and they did organic farming, and it was just so beautiful, and it was on the most beautiful road right across from the ocean. It is no longer there because of the lava. But Stewart was having a healing circle, and I really wanted to learn under him. And as luck would have it, I had scheduled my time there during the time that he was going to be there. And he is just so wise and humble and joyful and jolly, and that's why they call him Santa. And so part of my intention with having Body Worship podcast is to really be able to share the gifts of the beautiful people that I've learned under and the different practices that I've been able to do that my life has afforded me. And he is one of those gifts that I am so excited to share with you tonight. We are going to be having him on every 6 to 8 weeks because the principles of Huna are so sacred and so in alignment with who I am and what my journey is about. Let me introduce Stewart to you. He's actually a writer and a teacher whose focus is on helping and encouraging people's journeys home to themselves. He's the author of The Skills of Pleasure, Crafting the Life You Want, It's Time to Come Home, With Kindness and Compassion We Come Back to Ourselves, and dozens of articles on shamanism, pleasure, and consciousness. He maintains a healing and teaching practice at his home in the jungle on the island of Hawaii. Stewart is a trained professional chef with a master's degree in food science who has transitioned into a teacher, counselor, and mentor. To those seeking more peace in their inner world, he draws upon his extensive studies of shamanism, tantra, Buddhism, the mystical paths of the world, and wisdom from anywhere that resonates with him. And it is really a true testament. His home and the jungle surrounding his home was one of the few that were not devastated by Pele and by the lava. Almost every single person I know no longer has a home. They no longer have their land. Stephen Sadlier, who I have just had on the show, he had land there he can't even get to it. Thank goodness Stewart still has his beautiful home and jungle that surrounds him. So again, this episode is dedicated to the beautiful people of Hawaii and to those who lost their lives, their homes, their land, and their way of life. Okay, well, hello, Stewart. How are you doing today?
I'm terrific. Thank you. Thank you for having me on here.
Oh, you are so welcome. And I really appreciate you joining us all the way from Hawaii, the beautiful Big Island.
It wasn't a big effort to get there.
Well, I wish I could say that. So I would love to find out what kind of tea you are drinking today.
I'm drinking Lapsang Souchong, the pine-smoked tea from China. I started drinking this as an afternoon tea when I was in high school, and I still particularly like to have it in the afternoon. It's very refreshing, even here in Hawaii where it's warm and sometimes hot. This is a very refreshing tea that because of its smokiness, gives me a feel somewhat like barbecue, but also just a sense of being in the wood. It calms me down in ways that other teas don't.
Oh, that sounds lovely. I love woodsy scents and tastes, so I know exactly what you're talking about. There's something so grounding about that. I am actually drinking a marshmallow tea, and I just learned about it because it is really dry here in Colorado. And with the altitude and everything, I have to keep my humidifier going all the time, and I have to drink copious amounts of alkalized water, which is, really good for your body. But I just heard that this marshmallow tea is supposed to really help you stay hydrated. So this is my first day of drinking it, and I'm hoping for good results.
Well, I would like to suggest that you try drinking your marshmallow tea with the Lapsang Souchong and give you the sense of roasting marshmallows over a campfire.
Roasted. Well, that's a great idea. I love that. Thank you. When I first heard about you and I attended your healing circle there at Kalani on the Puna side of the Big Island, I read your description as a shaman of pleasure. And I know you're also a writer, a teacher, a counselor. It was my understanding that you were a Huna. And then once I attended your healing circle, I understood a little bit better what the word Huna actually meant. But I plan on having you on every 6 weeks or so to really speak about Huna principles and just being able to reach that level of joy. So I think it would be really wonderful for the listeners to really get some clarity around what is a shaman of pleasure, and also what does Huna mean?
Lovely. First off, I gravitated to shamanism after studying a wide variety of spiritual philosophies because I found the basic idea of shamanism more powerful than anything else that I had explored. And the reason is, even though there are many, many really great spiritual philosophies, this one had a stronger focus on creating your own reality and being mindful of how you go about doing that, which the 7 principles of Huna are a roadmap to that conscious creation that is not only accepting who you are, but also saying, look, I can change my reality. I don't have to just put up with what I've got going on right now. I became a shaman of pleasure, using pleasure as the modality for my healing practice. That is to say, that pleasure is the motivation that we have for doing anything, essentially. And I use pleasure in the widest general sense of feeling good. And so we all want to feel good, at least better than we currently feel. By recognizing that we are looking to feel better, and that is really what we're all trying to do, how do we go about doing that in the easiest possible way? Well, my feeling is that most of the pain and suffering that we have arises from how we use our minds.
Yes, very true.
That is to say, we chase the pleasure away by all our worry and criticism and expectations and all the various things we do to keep ourselves away from pleasure, even though we say we want it. So a shaman of pleasure goes back and heals things like people's stories that are told in a way that make us victims and thus make us feel awful. But by realizing that we can tell our stories differently and in ways that make us feel good, and that's what the healing is all about. So a shaman of pleasure is one that recognizes that we can change our reality by focusing on what makes us feel good and what doesn't, and making the corrections that we need to based on that understanding.
Okay, that always seems much more simple than it actually is. And I really love your teachings because the Huna principles are so pure and they're so harmonious. They really embody just the whole energy that you get when you're on the islands. Could you speak a little bit to what Huna actually means?
Sure. Huna is a Hawaiian word that means hidden or secret, as in the sense of esoteric. That is to say, it's not obvious. This is the wisdom that isn't obvious and requires a little bit of patience and willingness to explore the subtleties of life. Anything can be called Huna, it just means secret. A kahuna is somebody who understands the secrets, if you will, of any given subject. So you could have a kahuna of surfing, kahuna of cooking, kahuna of fishing. And so the whole idea is that this kahuna is somebody who has just learned the more esoteric stuff. So Huna was originally used as a description of a particular philosophy by Max Freedom Long back in the 1920s, who learned some about Hawaiian spirituality and created a system that blended lots of other philosophies, and he called that Huna, only because Huna is an appropriate word for it. The Huna that I teach comes from the Kahili family of the island of Kauai through my teacher, Serge Kahili King. And it is he who actually put the words to the concepts of Huna and the 7 principles, which are, number 1, the world is what you think it is. This is essentially the same thing as you create your own reality, or what you're thinking is what you're going to get. So this is the most powerful of them, and it is the essence of conscious creation. And understanding how we go ahead and put our lives together with our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, our attitudes, and our desires. This is what creates our experience. And when we really understand that what we are experiencing today, in this moment, is a function of what we have been thinking, when we really get that, then we are in a place of power and change things at will. Now, you're not going to change everything, and there are lots of things that you have set into motion already that will be hard to change, but there's a great deal that can be changed, and certainly our attitudes towards our reality, our experience, can easily be changed, and that changes our life. The second one is kala, which is translated as there are no limits. And it is the sense that we live in an infinite universe and that we, in fact, taken as a whole, all the various parts of us beyond our bodies and our minds, we are limitless. And the notion that we are limitless, that we are infinite, is an acceptance of the spiritual part of who we are. But another aspect of Kala is forgiveness, in the sense that without forgiveness, you can never be free. And so Kala is also freedom. And if you want to be free, you have to forgive everybody for everything, including yourself. The power of freedom is simply, let everybody be who they are and do what they do. And only in doing that can you be free to be who you are, to do what you do.
I really want to discuss that second one, and we will go through all of them. But one of the principles that a lot of Westerners have really started to become cognizant of is the practice of forgiveness. And I was really interested to learn from you that the Ho'oponopono that people are saying and people are teaching in workshops and building seminars around this practice is not exactly how it was actually intended. So can you explain that word? Because that is a word that has become really popular over the last 10 years or so.
Great, yes. Ho'oponopono. The word itself has three basic parts. Ho'o, the prefix, H-O, okina. O, the okina is a guttural stop, usually represented by an apostrophe. Means to make, very simple. Pono is a word that means rightness, goodness, flexibility, wisdom, harmony, balance. It's a great word that we don't have a real English equivalent of, but it means basically putting things back where they belong. Pono, that is, to double it up, is just to give it emphasis. So ho'oponopono is to make things right. Very simple. The Ho'oponopono traditionally has been a conflict resolution system that the Hawaiians needed to develop in order to bring and maintain harmony within the various families, each of which had their own section of an island. And so that would be one family. And if there was conflict within that family, it could totally disrupt and destroy the family because they were so far away from anything else, any other land. While there were people in other valleys, these people were self-reliant. And so the system is very simple in that if there's a problem between any two people or between the people in the land or the people in the sea or the sky, whatever, then the entire family would come together. One of the leaders would be the leader for the Ho'oponopono session. And in it, each person, in turn, got a chance to say what their view of the problem was. You get to blame all the other people, whatever you want. But the second round was about each person saying what their responsibility for the problem was or their contribution to the problem. So it was a way of everyone acknowledging their responsibility. And then the third round was, what are we going to do about it? Each person had a chance to say what they thought would resolve it. And there were two very important caveats. One is, at the end of this process, once it was decided what needed to be done, then everybody needed to forget about it. It was never to be brought up again. Because if resentment is allowed to fester, that destroys things. And everybody needed to come back into aloha, which is a sense of loving harmony. So if somebody was going to have a resentment, that was a big problem. And if somebody could not forgive and was going to hold on to a major resentment or anger, that person was banished until they could come back and forgive. So forgiveness is an integral part of Ho'oponopono, but it is not the whole essence of it. The newer version, or a newer version of Ho'oponopono, was created by Morna Simeone back in the 1960s. And she was a Hawaiian who had lots of understanding of Eastern religions as well as theosophy. And she had a vision or an inspiration to have her own version of Ho'oponopono, which is the one that has become very popular. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. A man named Ihaliakala Hugh Lin picked it up and used it in a mental prison. And by using this prayer over and over again with the files of people in the prison, he says that he was able to cure a lot of the inmates. Nobody has been able to reproduce those results that Hugh Lin had, but it is a wonderful thing if you are focused on forgiveness. That's the issue here, though. There are lots of things where forgiveness is not all that appropriate. For instance, if you are unhappy with your parents, that is to say, you have resentment towards your parents for not having brought you up the way you think that they should have. So you're looking for a way to forgive your parents. Well, okay, but the real problem is that you created expectations of what your parents should have done. So long after your parents did the very best they could, you come along and say, well, I expected better of you than, you showed me. Well, so you have created the expectations, made yourself angry, and then have the arrogance to say, well, all right, I'm going to forgive you for that. The problem wasn't of your parents. The problem is not understanding how expectations work. If you go back and say, look, I just created this expectation because I didn't like the way I am, really, so I'm going to blame it on my parents. Well, that's pretty crazy. So if you go back and say, oh, I take responsibility for this expectation that I created, and it was unreasonable of me to have expected my parents to do better than they knew how. They did the best they could, and I can't reasonably expect them to do more. So if I say, I'm taking responsibility for that, well, then the anger disappears. So there's no forgiveness needed. So there are lots of times when forgiveness is unnecessary. And if we understand how it is that we came to be angry at what somebody else did, we can say, oh, that's really my responsibility. Disappointment is the same way. If you're disappointed in somebody for not doing what you wanted to do, you're stomping your feet like a 4-year-old saying, I'm not getting my way. Because a disappointment is a choice. You don't ever have to choose disappointment. It is not the natural result of a failed expectation. You can choose anything else. You can say, all right, well, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, but that's all right. I can do something else.
And so it's about dropping those expectations and taking ownership of the fact that we've attached our emotions and disappointment and anger and blame on the situation, the person, and what our level of expectation was.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that. Yes, if we could gloss over very quickly, the rest of the 7 principles, just because I do want to come back to those in some of our future episodes that we do together. And then I know you have some different practices that we're going to run through really quickly here as well. And so we were on the third practice.
Very quickly then, the third principle of Huna.
Principle, sorry.
That's right, is about focus. Energy flows where attention goes. This is very important with healing. This is very important with understanding what's going on in your life, because what you focus on is what you are creating or what you're adding energy to. And so if you are putting your focus on how miserable you feel, you'll feel more misery. And if you put your focus on joy and pleasure, then that's what you're going to increase. So it is very important to take charge of your focus. Use the muscle, will is the muscle, of your focus, and turn your focus to the things that bring you joy and turn your focus away from the things that make you unhappy.
And you know what? I actually experienced this in Hawaii. I don't know. This is where this is really amplified for me. I used to go there 6 times a year to the different islands because of auditions that I was conducting with my other job. My very first vacation I ever had by myself after everybody else from the company left was on the Puna side. I was like, why do I feel so different here in Hawaii than I do back home? I realized it was exactly what you said. When I put myself in vacation mode and I'm there, I'm appreciating the beautiful flowers, the ocean, the breeze, the people. It's so easy to be in that mindset, and you amplify every experience of joy because you've already allocated that time and consecrated that time in your mind as, okay, this is me time. And I realized that while I was there. And so I was like, okay, I'm really going to practice this at home because I live in a beautiful place in West Hollywood, California. I'm by the ocean. I have access to really everything I need. And so I'm going to do this at home. And I did. And I started noticing things just really turning around, joy being so much more easily accessible. Yeah, that is so true. Anything you focus on amplifies.
That was very nicely said, Anna Marie. Yeah, it is a critical skill to develop, that focusing on what you want to focus on and taking your focus away from the things that make you unhappy. The fourth principle, if I may keep on just quickly going through these.
Yes.
Okay, so the fourth principle is about now is the moment of power. This is about time. This is about being present. This is about recognizing that there really is no past. There is no future. The past is only our memories and how we feel about them, and the future is only speculation. By staying in the present moment, that is to say, being consciously aware of what is happening right now, that's when we have power. That's where we can use our power. It is sometimes called the spacious present, where we can be aware of much more than what we can see and feel and hear. It's a matter of being present to ourselves in all of our aspects, not just the physical and the mental, but being present to our soul, if you will. And in that, we can identify as soul and thus use the power of our soul. And I use soul as a word to refer to our higher being. Whatever word you want, you can call it higher self or higher mind. At any rate, it is the greater part of who we are. And that is where the power is. So by being present in the now, then we have access to the greatest power that we have. The fifth principle is all about love. It's a recognizing that we are love and the energy of love, and that all we really want to be doing is staying in this place of love, and that is essentially being soul. So we want to stay in aloha, which basically means being in the place of love, as much as we possibly can. The sixth principle is about power again. It simply says that all power comes from within. We don't get power from anybody else. We recognize that the power that we have is a result of turning our focus inward and taking that power to choose what it is we think, choose what we feel, choose how we act, and choose where we want to take our lives. So it is the power of our choices and being mindful that we are making choices all the time. The last one is Pono. It's effectiveness is the measure of truth. So that means that what works is what is true. So we want to pay attention to, does where we live work? Does where our living, does that work for us? Do our relationships work for us? This is about wisdom. Wisdom is knowing what works and what doesn't. That's all wisdom is. So it is a matter of paying attention to what works, not some kind of ideal or some kind of system of belief that is supposed to be the end-all, be-all. We need to, in each moment, say, okay, is this really working for me? Does this make me feel happy? Is this really what I want to be doing? That is a very important question to constantly ask ourselves as we go through life. So there's a very, very brief overview of the 7 principles of Huna.
Thank you for that. And I am really looking forward to being able to, in future episodes, unpack each one of those. And really, I know you've got some great exercises for them, and, really be able to understand them in a much deeper sense. One of the practices that you taught me when I was there really helped me to amplify joy. And I would love if you could share that with everybody.
I think you're referring to what I call the joyous mind cleanse.
Yes.
I developed this cleanse because the retreat center that you were staying at had so many cleanses going on. The green cleanse, the juice cleanse, the master cleanse, and there are all sorts of cleanses that none of which really address the big issues within the body. The biggest toxins, which is criticism, self-criticism. All these things that we say to ourselves that make us feel awful. So the Joyous Mind Cleanse is a very simple program of twice a day for about 5 minutes, appreciating things.
Could we actually go through that for a minute so the listener can experience that and have them rate themselves of what level of joy they're feeling, whether you call it happiness or joy? Can we do that?
I invite the listeners to, at this moment, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate how you are feeling overall. Now, this is very subjective, but with 10 as really ecstasy and 1 being total depression, how are you feeling? Once you have given yourself a number, take the next 60 seconds to look around where you are and appreciate things in your environment, right where you are. You don't have to move at all. Just over the next 60 seconds, just look around, and you can appreciate things more than once, but just spend the time appreciating. I'll call you back when the minute is up. All right, there's a minute. Now, go back in and evaluate how you feel on that same scale of 1 to 10 and see how you feel now. And I bet you feel noticeably better after 1 minute of appreciation. So the point here is, if you can spend time appreciating things, you will be a lot happier. And then the second part of the Joyous Mind Cleanse is a fast. It's my kind of fast, because you can eat or drink anything you want. It's a week-long fast, and on the first 3 days of this fast, you're only allowed 3 criticisms a day. Yourself or anybody else or anything else. Only 3 criticisms a day. And then the next 2 days, days 4 and 5, you're only allowed 1 criticism a day. And then on the last 2 days, days 6 and 7, you're only allowed none. No criticisms at all. And if you can do that, it will change your life.
It certainly will. I forgot the last part of that practice because I was on vacation when I went to your healing circle. But I went back to West Hollywood, and I made a practice of just looking around my home and appreciating everything in my home, and then appreciating my body, appreciating how My default, I always say, is happy. I'm just a happy person 99% of the time. And I noticed that was so amplified. And it wasn't until the other day that we talked that I realized I had forgot about the criticism part of that. And I have consciously, over the last 2 days, been only allowing myself 3 thoughts of criticism. And it's really hard to manage that. So I could see how this would completely change you and change your life, because you catch yourself like, oh, okay, cancel, and then I try to replace it with a happy thought.
Criticism, we criticize ourselves and others because we think that we can make things better. Particularly with ourselves. We criticize ourselves because we want to be better.
Okay.
That is to say, we want to enjoy our lives more.
Right.
The problem is it doesn't work. It's a really funny thing that we're all taught about criticism. And we think that by criticizing ourselves and others, we're helping in some way. But we're not. We're making things worse. We're making ourselves feel bad. And by making ourselves feel bad, we destroy our happiness. So since it doesn't work, there's no point in doing it. We just need to get out of the habit of criticizing. So it's a matter of making sure that we decide that we're okay as we are, without changes, without doing anything.
Exactly.
We're okay. Now, we may choose to do things differently because we think it'll bring us more pleasure. Fine. Or we want to have an adventure and we may want to try just doing things different for its own sake. But if we're doing things to make ourselves better, to improve ourselves, we're saying, oh, there's something wrong with me. And that makes us feel terrible, and it destroys our power, destroys our ability to be real with people that we love. It is one of the worst possible things that we can do. It's totally unnecessary and useless.
And so taking that critiquing out of it, there was a part of that did stay with me, because I stopped using the words constructive criticism. And I used to conduct auditions and work with kids in Hollywood. So I started using the term constructive suggestions, and it was much softer, and it changed the way I delivered any kind of notes, if you will. That's what they call it in Hollywood. And then it also changed how it landed just by taking that word out of it.
Good. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be criticized.
Right. Yeah. And so if you just say, here's a constructive suggestion for you, it just changes the energy around everything. Thank you so much for everything that you have gone through with us. Mahalo. And
you're welcome.
I would love to hear one of your favorite ways to practice self-care.
Great. When I go to bed, which is usually around 9, between 9 and 10, I will sleep for 4 to 5 hours, and then I get up and I meditate. It is the most important time of my day. It is so delicious to sit, and I frankly go to my sacred recliner. And I say that facetiously, but I do sit in a recliner.
I like sacred recliner. I like that.
Good. Okay. Well, that's how it feels at that moment. It is so sacred. But I will be there for usually an hour and a half to 2 hours in the middle of the night, simply being present to what's going on inside me. One of the things that in terms of we create our own reality, it is the inner world, what's going on in the inner world, that creates the outer world. Well, until we have really discovered and explored what's going on inside of us, then we don't have the connection from what's going on there to our experience. So if we want to change our outer experience, we need to explore how we are creating that outer experience with our inner experience. So I take the time to just feel, to be aware of what's coming up for me, relaxing into the intensity of what's going on. That's a major skill that I think is underrated, just relaxing into the intensity of life, of all of our feelings. Your feelings can't hurt you, but resisting them can. So by just relaxing into these wild feelings allows them to pass on and allows the energy to flow again. So it's a major skill. And taking the time to do that, I think, is very important. So it's certainly important for me. And that's how I take care of myself.
Well, that's a really beautiful practice. I have been reading about in earlier times, people used to have what they called 2 sleeps. So they would do just what you're saying. They would fall asleep for a while. They would wake up. And a lot of times they would use that for prayer. And then they would go back to sleep again. So I don't know if you're practicing 2 sleeps or not per night, or if you just stay up from that point. But that just reminded me of that.
Well, no, I do go back to bed. I have my second sleep.
Okay.
But that period between first sleep and second sleep is a really special, sacred time. And yes, reading is fine, but so is sex. It's a great time for sex. And it's a great time for just being comfortable with who you are. And that's the whole point. I mean, if we all learned how to be comfortable with who we are, then we wouldn't have wars.
Exactly.
We keep being uncomfortable with who we are, and then we blame it on somebody else. And so it just goes on and on and on.
You know, I love how you simplify things. And as I told you before, I used to plan my vacations around being able to be there when you were teaching, when you were doing your healing circles, which is teaching, and your healing circles are so beautiful. So I really look forward to having you on future shows so that we can help the listeners really create their own sacred space in their home with your teaching. So thank you so much for your time and energy today, and aloha.
It's been a delight to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Aloha.
And that concludes tonight's episode. Be sure to check me out on my website, bodyworship.me, or my Facebook page, Body Worship Coach, where you can schedule a free initial consultation for personal empowerment coaching, holographic quantum long-distance healing sessions, the Happiness Project, which is known to stop panic attacks, anxiety, and depression within 1 session. I also offer past life regressions, workshops, and seminars. Join me next week to anoint your awareness with ancient knowledge and practices by tuning into another episode of Body Worship, an oasis for the mind, a temple for the body, a sanctuary for the soul. If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to subscribe and like the show at the link below. I'm Anna Marie with my lioness sidekick Sophie, and you create an amazing day. Namaste.